Startup Boston Week. My name is Samantha, and I'll be your host today. And a huge thank you again to Suffolk University's Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference. Suffolk University hosts a lot of great opportunities for learning, both in and outside of these classrooms. We really appreciate their partnership, hosting the entirety of Startup Boston Week, both this year and last year. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire greater Boston and New England startup community, all industries, all startup departments, and all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer-led, and the folks working the conference today here are volunteering their time as well. So thank you for attending the conference. It's a labor of love, and we really appreciate you playing a role in shaping our startup community. Thank you so much again for attending, and on to the session.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Samantha. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann Rush. I'm the CEO of Elastic Consulting, which is an HR consultancy. This is also my third year volunteering for Startup Boston Week. I'm part of the programming team and was excited to be asked to moderate this panel today. I'm going to let my colleagues up here introduce themselves. So, Jess, if you want to go first.
Sure. Hi. Hi, my name's Jessica Fracolosi. I'm the founder and full-time operator at the Handlebar, which is a chain of boutique fitness studios in Boston and Cambridge. This is my first year taking part in Startup Boston activities, but have tried to give back as much as I can to opportunities like this whenever I can over the last 12 or so years. I'll tell a little bit about my story. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about it. But I went to Northeastern University, and right when go Huskies. One of my first calls was to a friend of a friend there that was involved in the entrepreneurship department, and started working with their venture accelerator there. And so I've been able to take part in that startup community, but I'm excited to branch out to the greater Boston startup community, and really grateful to be here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kadani Fresgy with Minority. I'm the project director for the Minority Business Development Agency. We work with minority-owned businesses to make sure that they have access to capital, access to contracts, and then we will also kind of meet you where you're at to help you get to the next place. So we're always looking to be a catalyst to help you kind of further your business. And if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out.
Excellent. So for both of you, as we think about the title and the focus of today, getting past go, bringing your startup out of the idea stage, what are some of the first things that come to mind when you reflect back on your own experiences? So you have a dream, and then what, maybe? If you could share just a little bit about that.
Sure. Like I mentioned, one of my first calls was, not call, but I guess a Facebook message most likely, was to somebody that I knew was involved in entrepreneurship at Northeastern, because I was a biology major. I didn't have any business classes under my belt at Northeastern. So even though I was a recent graduate, I hadn't been involved in the business school. And so got coffee with that person, and he right away connected me with Northeastern's IDEA program, which, like I said, is like a student-run venture accelerator. And so that was a really great, kind of one of the first meetings, at least. And then another one of my first calls was actually a competitor. So I had this idea to open a spin studio, and for whatever reason, I reached out to the only person in Boston doing it, and I got coffee with her, and that was interesting. But yeah, so just try to gather as much information about the process and about the competition as I could. That's how I started.
Kadani?
Perfect. So how I kind of started is I'm a disabled veteran. So I was using VA services and was able to work with a guy, Jerry Pinsky, over at the Veterans Business Gym. And it was very eye-opening for me, because not only did it give me an opportunity to kind of walk through it with somebody who's kind of done been through the process themselves, but it also gave me an opportunity to collaborate with folks along the way, veterans who had been disabled, who were also trying to start their own business as well.
And what types of information or documentation do you feel you want to make sure that you have in place before you make that first phone call or have that first outreach? How many ducks should you have in a row? And what are those?
I think, I guess it depends on what that first call is. For me, it was just gaining background knowledge on how to build a business plan. So it was pretty early on. A little bit later, a few months later in the process, when trying to actually raise money and consider leases, there's definitely a lot more I would recommend having in place, like your financial model and a lot of the brand, as much of the brand established as possible to give yourself credibility. I think that was really helpful. But that first call just to learn how to build a business plan or first meeting, I don't think you just have to be hungry to do the work.
I say you don't know what you don't know, right? And fortunately for me, I was able to kind of jump into a gym, right? So they kind of laid everything out for me. There was a platform. So, we talked about, hey, marketplace analysis. So I would understand, what position, what market was available to me. Who could I reach out to? Where should I go? Those kind of things, as well as collaboration with folks who have been in the space a lot longer than I had, right? So what I originally started out to do was I was working with veterans who came back from the military, because as a vet, you have all these skills and this skill set, but you don't necessarily have a degree or any piece of paper that kind of verifies that. So, how do we take our skills that we've been trained to use over the last 10 to 15 years and put them to work in the private sector? So being able to do something like that and collaborate with people who had done it before, I mean, if I could say anything, reach out to those who are in the space, right? Try to figure that out. Try to find mentors. Try to find someone who is willing to take you by the hand and work with you, because that'll help alleviate some of the stress going into it and kind of some of those missteps, right? So you don't have to take the missteps. So you don't have to take 2 steps back to take 1 step forward, kind of thing.
Great. And Kadani, I'll start with you. What are some of the things that folks should know about when it comes to applications, permits, gathering documentation, both from your experiences as an entrepreneur as well as in your current role?
So I'll take that from the entrepreneur side first. Understanding what it takes to go get an EIN, to become incorporated. So, frankly, I would say you need about $1,000, right? Because it's going to cost you about $300 to get incorporated, another $500 for your annual filing, and then whatever you need along the way in terms of cards, business cards, whatever you want to kind of make up as you go. So those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about from your perspective, Jess?
Yeah, I think that lines up. I think I didn't necessarily have the EIN in place until, I don't think I started spending money until I had some money secured. Because and I'm answering my questions from the perspective of a brick and mortar business owner, where it's pretty clear, like, I'm not going to be able to generate income until I have a lease. So I think that can be very different from a lot of other types of startups. But yeah, so I guess what was the documentation to fill out? Yeah, I mean, one conversation leads you to another. You go to the bank, I want a small business bank account. What do I need? Like, they're going to tell you what you need. The EIN, the formation of an entity, I think I kind of got advised early on that you're going to probably, I knew I was going to be raising, at that point I kind of had decided I was going to raise angel investment. So I knew there's going to be some legal operating agreement stuff. So sort of pick an attorney that could help me with all of the legal process. So those were some of the initial, like, I guess, for me, it was like conversations and relationships, and then the documentation came later once it was like, okay, we're actually underway, which was nice to know. Like, you sort of, like I said, brick and mortar, you sort of need to know that you're going to have a lease before you can proceed. So getting to that point was like a really big check mark.
Sure, sure. Actually, tell us just a little bit more about that, because it's a great call out. Me launching a consulting business, once I had a laptop, and I had an EIN, I could kind of hang my shingle at any point in time. But for you, there are a lot more steps. How did you sort of feel ready? Okay, now I'm ready to take on that lease.
I think it was securing the funding. So I knew that there was going to be a small amount. Looking back, it seemed like a huge amount. I mean, at the time, it seemed like a huge amount. Looking back, it was rather small what I got to get off the ground for. But there was going to be some upfront money, and I felt really uncomfortable with debt. So I decided that I wanted to raise money from an investor, whether it be friends and family or possible angel investor. And so it was like getting that funding secured, figuring out, I think I needed $200,000 to get, like, that's what I thought I needed to get a studio open. And then from there, what I underestimated was how long it would take to find a space with no experience operating a business, no brand. I mean, I had a website and kind of some basic brand basics, but I think I underestimated that, yes, I need people to invest in me, but the landlord is also an investor. And so that relationship was like a whole second round of kind of finding funds, was finding a landlord that was willing to write a 10-year deal with somebody without any experience.
Interesting, very interesting. Are there any grants that either of you are aware of? Kadani, maybe we can start with you.
I believe there's some grants throughout the state you can go find. I don't have the grants off the top of my head, but if you go to the state website, there's always grants there. There's also grants by city as well, so you can take a look and do your little research, Google that stuff, and it's there.
I've gotten grants over the years, specifically during the pandemic. Female-owned business, a big portion of my company is through COVID is owned by myself, even though my investors ended up being men, but I owned enough percentage to like still classify as female-owned. And got a couple there. I looked a little bit at the beginning, but because there was like a decent sized chunk of money that I needed, it was like $10,000 here, $15,000 there. And to me, it just felt like a lot of paperwork when I could just focus on maybe raising angel investors to cover the whole amount. But grants have come to play over the last 12 years I've been in business, like I said, specifically during the pandemic, to help. Anything helped during that time.
Sure.
So there's not always grant money available. So typically what we do at the MBDA is we try to align you with access to capital, whether it be VCs, private equity, or your traditional banks. But it's grants are great, right? Because it's free money. But at the end of the day, grants usually, while they're not usually enough, right? They're usually a small piece of what you're looking for. And what I like to do at the MBDA, or what we try to do, is make sure that we create a one-stop shop for you, so you don't have to kind of piecemeal it out grant by grant. But hey, let's go find this individual or this organization that can get you where you need to go right here, right now.
Makes sense. Can you actually, following up on that stream, can you talk a little bit about some of the other resources that the organization that you work for currently provides?
Some of the resources?
Yeah, just some of the, you mentioned helping to sort of steer in terms of capital investment, any other types of resources that folks can check it out for?
Yeah, so we'll also try to give you access to contracts, right? So the great thing about the G&E and working with the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, is that we have corporate sponsors, and those corporate sponsors are often, we're blessed in a situation where those corporate sponsors already know what the right thing to do. And it's not just the right thing to do, it's actually the thing that makes the most sense in terms of business. And that is to work with minority-owned businesses to kind of give everyone a fair shot at the bite of the apple, because when doing so, we create more opportunity for everyone. So some of the resources that we provide, again, are access to contracts. We'll provide you access to cash financing, and then we'll also just provide access to, for instance, if you need a CPA to help you with your books, we'll provide that as well. And all the stuff we do at the MBDA is at no cost to the MBE ever. So if you need an accountant, you need a fractional CFO, you need a fractional HR person, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, we'll provide those services for you at no cost.
I just want to jump in here because that reminds me, that was similar to the Venture Accelerator at Northeastern. I realize now looking back, I had like $10,000, not 10,000, but a couple $1,000s worth of pro bono legal help and pro bono bookkeeping to help me learn QuickBooks and like I mentioned, the business planning guide. So that was sort of my resource to startup resource, but similarly, my recommendation would be certain alma maters, might have a pool of resources. They also did gap funding, which for a lot of startups made a lot of sense. And that's what I was initially interested in, was applying and getting selected for like this gap funding. But as I mentioned, it didn't make so much sense because gap funding is sort of like take you from point A to point B so that you can then get to point C. And my business was kind of like, well, I need all of it to get it open. So the gap funding didn't really make sense. But yeah, I looking back now, remember the pro bono legal help, and those days are gone. Got to pay now, but
Not here. We're still
I was
doing
just
it.
gonna
We're still
say,
doing it for free.
They're gone for you because of your success, but they are still available for those who are starting
getting
out.
started. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I would also tap
please.
other organizations. I would tap the SBA. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our partners over at the CIC, the Capital Readiness Grant. So, look those folks up, reach out to those folks. Those are great resources to help you as you're kind of as you're starting your journey on the path to success in entrepreneurship.
Those are all wonderful suggestions. I would just add SCORE as well is a great organization providing similar services, consulting for those who are trying to start their own business. That's terrific. Talk to me a little bit about maybe you both mentioned early on thinking through your business plans, competitive analysis, marketing analysis, and obviously those are all large topics in and of themselves. But what are some of the things that, as you approached working out a marketing plan or developing your initial business plan, that you felt like went well? And then maybe what are some things that you feel like, gosh, I wish I had known XYZ, or I wish I had taken XYZ step then?
You want me to go?
Yeah, sorry.
Go free.
I think looking back, the piece of advice that always really sticks out to me with the whole business planning process and launch process was everything is going to take twice as long as you think, and it's going to cost 3 times as much as you think it's going to cost. And yeah, about probably 6 months into my business planning, I was pitching to investors and things, and somebody told me that, and it really helped put everything into perspective and eliminate some of the frustration that I was feeling with hitting dead ends, or it felt like dead ends, was, no, this is a part of the journey. And so that was a big one for me. Things that went well, I was lucky in the timing. I think I saw what was happening with indoor cycling in New York City, and I remember comparing it to like Froyo, like Berryline, and like things like that. Like, oh, this started in New York and LA, and then it moved up to Boston, and now they're everywhere. So maybe that trend will happen with this type of business, and spinning will come to Boston as it started in New York and LA. Lucky for me, it's been a little bit less of a fad than the Froyo was. But we definitely felt ebbs and flows of fitness trends, and we've pivoted, and now we've got a multimodality business, which the pandemic helped, I think, accelerate that need to evolve and offer stuff besides just one modality. So that was great. But yeah, I feel like in that initial planning phase, just like the reminder that it's going to take twice as long as you think, cost 3 times as much as you think it's going to cost. But yeah, I think it's nice if you've got something that's sort of trendy, and you can see what's happening in other cities, and it's not yet, especially for brick and mortar. And you kind of have models to look at, businesses for fitness. I could literally log into SoulCycle and Flywheel in LA and in New York and look at their utilization numbers and start to map out kind of how much they might be making, what things might be costing them, and compare that. So that was nice. I wasn't creating something from scratch, really. I had things to model after.
For me, I was in a unique situation, a unique position where I got to leverage the VA, right? And the VA had this gym for me, and it was already set up. So, I didn't have to kind of take some of the side steps or run into some of the pitfalls that other folks did. But what I will talk about is maybe one of the MBEs that I work with today and what they've done to be successful. And this gentleman's a great guy, great business. And what they were able to do is, what I found fascinating about this person was they went out and they actually built a board. Well before they ever had their organization off the ground, they went out and they found people in select areas who were willing to work with them. Hey, I'm not an accountant, but I'm going to need an accountant, right? So they went out and found someone who would help them as an accountant or CFO, I should say. Hey, I don't necessarily know a ton about business development, so they went out and found someone that would help them around business development. So this individual, they built this huge board, not a huge board, but they built a board that could kind of check all the spots, all their blind spots, if you will, before they got started. So when it was time to launch and it was time to kind of do things, they hit the ground running, right? And we were able to go get that organization. We were able to get the money because, hey, they already had a CFO in place. They already had a president who had done things like this before, and someone who's been in business, I guess, development. So, when you look at the organization from a top-down situation, okay, well, this person doesn't have a lot of experience, and they might not know a lot, but they've surrounded themselves with a ton of people who do, right? And that gives you a little bit more room to trust that this will be a successful leap, if you will.
That's a great example. Jess, you mentioned things taking twice as long, and that really resonated with me. How long, for both of you, I'm curious, how long from the time that you maybe made that first phone call that we talked about at the beginning to the time where you sort of officially were in business, and then to the time that you felt like, I'm really making a go of this. I really feel like this is going to work long term.
Ballpark. I would say it was about 18 months from idea to I left my full-time job because I wanted to focus. I have a hard time, I was working in a startup for 10 months out of college before I went and did this, and I had to leave that job to really focus in on building a business plan. I couldn't split my time, so I went back to waiting tables. From that point until opening doors at the business, it was about 18 months, and then to feeling stable and I'm really making a go of it, I would say it's been 12 years. I don't know, I'm not there yet. No, I mean, we were cash flow positive pretty early, which is great, but had investors pushing for growth. And it always honestly has felt like I haven't quite gotten there, that I'm fully on top of it. But yeah, the numbers were looking good within the first year.
Awesome. Good on
Well, for me, I had the misfortune or the fortune of trying to start a business right before COVID hit, right? So while I put myself in a position where I thought I could win, the world told me something different, and it took me on a different path, and I'm appreciative of the path because I'm now sitting here in front of you all, and I get to work with organizations and help them make their dreams come true every day. So for me, start to finish was a little different. I started making money after probably about 9.5 months, 10 months into it. But COVID happens, we struggle. We're resilient, we bounce back, and here we are.
That's wonderful. And what do you typically advise folks who are coming to you for advice around that sort of patience and resilience? What advice do you offer them?
It's a great question. It's funny because no one starts at the same place, right? We're all starting in different places. So the advice I give to someone who's trying to just pick it up off the ground and do it right now versus someone who's kind of already got it going and kind of running it are two different things. But what I would say is, again, find ways to take shortcuts. And what I mean by that is find ways to get access to information faster, right? And what does that look like? To me, it's reaching out to people who've done it before, right? I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, right? Like I don't, add rubber to it. That's fine. Like, well, we magnetize it and make it faster, something like that. But let's not reinvent it. So, taking advantage of those people and those resources that are always right there available to you, I think is huge. And I think again, it's all about mitigating risk and trying to make sure you don't have these pitfalls, right? Because that's the hardest thing when you're starting out is, one, your time is everything, right? And if you don't kill it, you don't eat it. So it's, making sure that you find success. But it's hard, right? And I get that because it's new and and again, I say it all the time, you just don't know what you just don't know. So what I would say is be resilient. You're going to fail. Understand that you're going to fall on your face 2-3 times. But know that you have a support system. The MBDA, the SBA, there are organizations out there to help you and uplift you. So, when you run into the pitfalls and you run into the shortcomings, just don't give up. Know that there is opportunity for you, and it's just around the corner.
And I'll follow up a little bit off of that because it does remind me, you don't know what you don't know, and talk to people who've done it before. And I mentioned to you guys one of my first calls was a competitor, somebody who had opened a boutique studio, and I see that a lot, especially young entrepreneurs thinking about starting their own business, fitness business. I'll get like phone calls from people to have conversations, and I'm always more than willing, so long as they seem like they've done a little bit of initial research and they know a little bit about me and my business, then absolutely, I'll give you 30 minutes or an hour of my time. If you're coming in with good questions, like absolutely. That first meeting that I took, met her at a Starbucks, and she didn't shake my hand. And it was very interesting. It was kind of like, oh, it kind of taught me the kind of founder that I didn't want to be. And really, since then, it's rare. It doesn't happen that frequently, but I think that a lot of young entrepreneurs are kind of like, well, I've got my plan and I've got my idea, but I don't want to share it because I'm afraid that I'm going to be giving up too much valuable information. There are no secrets. There is like you said, there is just what the difference between a successful business and a small business and an unsuccessful small business doesn't have to do with the trade secrets that you have in your business plan. It has to do with your ability to execute on them. So by the time my business plan was ready, I could have handed that to probably a dozen different people, and none of them were going to. You have to have a very specific set of characteristics to be able to get to that point. So I think if you have an idea and you like talking to people, don't be afraid to share your idea. Just share it, bounce it off. It's not going to get, unless of course you're like, I don't know, inventing something really specialized. But for a service business like what I'm in, I would say just don't be afraid to share. And learn and have hard conversations where people don't shake your hand, because you take away from that as well, things that you don't want to be. When 10 years later, there's a young founder that wants to get together with you, how you want to treat them and support them.
Yeah, unless it's a patent pending, feel free to share.
Yeah.
That's wonderful advice, and I can tell we have an audience who probably several members are around the stage of go or wanting to get, what is our title, get past go. So I actually want to open it up for audience questions. We've got folks with mics, and I will ask that you talk into the mic so that everybody online can hear. So we can just, yep, perfect.
Fellow Husky here, so that's awesome. I'm curious, Jessica, could you speak to a little bit about like the founding team and how your role has evolved in those years? I saw it says head of brand and marketing, and I was curious to learn more about that.
Yes. So started off, I was the only operator of the owner group. I had 5 angel investors who were all like banking bros from different Ivy League schools that I got connected with because my brother went to one of those Ivy League schools. And they didn't want to leave their jobs at Goldman, or a couple of them were just like, and they invested in me as an operator. So they were all kind of silent, but very helpful. Like obviously I didn't have any business background, so had a lot of knowledge on finance and getting started. So that was like the team. It was me and then these other people who had ownership stake. But then grew a team around me of employees leading up to COVID. And then when the pandemic hit, I had taken out a business loan. Remember I told you I didn't feel good about debt? Still don't. And took out debt right before the pandemic, SBA debt. But SBA 7A loan to grow into a North Station location, and then also to do a partner buyout, a leveraged buyout, some of my partners, so that I could have more ownership stake. And that was like 6 months, closed on the loan like a year before the pandemic hit, and then things got really scary. And I had my home leveraged on that loan, and it was just like really dark for like 3 full years. And I was in a position where we needed to make a move and merged with a competitor. So merged with Turnstile. And so now I've got small, I had to dilute my ownership stake. We grew in footprint. We kept the Handlebar brand. But the Turnstile, we took on 3 Turnstile studios that are now Handlebar studios. And I now have 2 other owner operators that are on the ground, which is good. I've got a 6-year-old son. I've got one on the way. And it was a good like lifestyle move for me because the business during the pandemic, I lost key employees that I had relied on, and it really kind of all fell on me. And so now I'm the founder. I put that by my name because the Handlebar brand is mine, but I work with 2 other entrepreneurs who started their own cycling studio. And one of them does a lot of like finance and administration stuff. One of them does a lot of the fixing bikes, fixing sound on the ground. And my focus is on marketing and brand. So that's kind of how that evolution happened.
I'll say this, I'm not trying to be funny, but debt isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, especially if it's somebody else's money, somebody else's, I'll say that because I see this all the time, right? I see entrepreneurs who believe in themselves and they want to try a go at it, which I support 1,000%. If you don't believe in yourself, no one will. But at the end of the day, there are these organizations and these corporations who have a ton of money to lose, right? And if they make a bad bet, they're fine. You make a bad bet, you're SOL, So, I think that while you want to, I don't, I'm saying like debt's not the right debt is not a bad thing, right? You don't necessarily want to pick up debt just to take debt, but the right debt is not a bad debt, it's a good debt.
And young founders that are thinking about opening a single location gym or boutique operation, I recommend that they look into debt now. Even though I wasn't ready to at the time, my biggest stressors and emotional roller coaster have come along with my relationship with my investors. And yeah, the debt was scary during the pandemic because it was big. But I think things would have been different. My growth strategy would have been a lot different had I taken on debt for the first one too. So it's like, would we have opened 3 locations in 1 year or 2 years if I hadn't had investors kind of pushing me from behind the scenes? Maybe not. But yeah, debt, I mean, it can be healthy, I think. It's just, everybody's got their own tolerance.
I got the mic, so I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah, we've got one here too, but go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nadia. I'm a startup advisor, and it's really close to my heart, everything we talk about here, about getting your dream off the ground and becoming your own boss and fulfilling, your passion. My question is, for all 3 of you actually, you can have all the plans and business plans and strategies. In the end, it's going to take that leap of faith to do this. I'm super curious to hear from you guys. What was that moment where you said, yeah, I'm going to do this? Like, can you remember, was it like a point in time? Was it what was that trigger?
For me, I had come back from Iraq. I found myself working for organizations time and time again, and I had buddies who were coming back from Iraq, and I was lucky. I was in tech. There was always a job in tech for me, so I went and did that. But I remember working with some individuals who were great at what they do, whether they were mechanics or whether they were combat lifesavers or finance, whatever the case may be. They were excellent in their field, but for whatever reason, when they got out of the military, they had a hard time finding their job and finding their footing. And I said to myself, like, that shouldn't be the case, right? You have this access to skills. The government trusts you with top secret clearance, right? Why can't you go find a job, right? So for me, it was, this isn't right. We should do something about it. And I decided right there on the spot that, hey, that's when I was going to figure it out.
Really cool. For me, it was took this job out of college with a startup activewear company, and I was one of 4. And so that kind of was twofold. I got to see what was happening in boutique fitness, and because I was selling yoga clothing to yoga instructors, but also I got to see what it was like working for an entrepreneur and working in a startup environment. And I was losing sleep, and I was really stressed, and I was stressed about the relationships with my boss and I didn't have equity. I was getting paid $20 an hour. And there was a moment where my boyfriend, husband now, and I were sitting in our apartment, and I was just like, if I'm going to lose sleep like this, I might as well be the person running the decisions. And there was a little speck of, if this guy can do it, then I can do it.
I love these examples. For me, actually, I got really bad advice from some headhunters I had reached out to, but I'm grateful for it. So I spent the majority of my career, over 15 years, in an enterprise-sized company, and really wanted to do something different with smaller organizations where I could see things end to end. And so I reached out to some headhunters, and they said, you stayed too long. I could get you a similar job at State Street or Fidelity. And I wasn't looking for a different commuting. I was looking for something very different. And I felt like, but if I can't get it that way, I'm going to try to create it for myself. I gave myself a year. I knew that it would take time. It still took longer than I thought, but I knew
You were underway.
but I knew it would take time, and I knew myself that if I didn't sort of give myself that year, and I started second guessing myself earlier than that I would probably call up my friends and say, hey, do you still have my role? But I'm grateful for what I again think was bad advice, because I do think you can transition between corporate environment and a smaller business, but that enabled me to create it myself. So. All right, and
hello.
Hi.
Thank you all for being here. This has been a really great panel so far. I'm Bryn. I'm an early stage startup founder as well, and it's really inspiring to see 2 women founders on this panel. My co-founder is actually a Husky, and we're both involved in ideas, so super cool to hear about that. But my question is, I think that you had said that you started 12 years ago, and I think that the traction points that a lot of investors are looking for have really changed over the past 12 years. And I wanted to ask, what did that look like for you then when you were securing funding? And for both of you guys, I'd love to hear your perspective about bootstrapping versus VC, raising from VCs, as like only 2% of venture capital funding is going to women-founded teams. So I'd love to hear about that. Thanks.
For me, VC, I feel like we're still too small for VC. It's just like you've got to be producing numbers to even like 2 million in EBITDA to even, I feel like for even private equity. So that was never really on my radar, but angel investors were. And that was, I don't know how that has changed. I feel like I gave a pretty sweet deal. Like I still have partners that have been in Boston twice in the last 12 years who are getting dividends on a quarterly basis from the investment that they made. So, but it's a big risk, and you've got to find somebody that's, willing to take that risk. When you say traction points, what do you mean by that?
I just feel like a lot of founders, when they are applying for grants or they're applying for venture capital funding or reaching out to angels, what I've heard a lot of the times is like they're looking for accelerators that you've been a part of, or pre-product revenue, because obviously R&D
Yeah.
is so expensive before you even have that launch point. So in order to keep your business sustainable, you need to have revenue coming in or funding coming in. But it seems like the requirements in order to get that funding or to get that pre-product revenue is high. You need to have certain things that are backing you.
Yeah. I remember potential investors asking that question, like, have you thought about doing pop-up classes to show that you can do this? Have you thought about, and for me, it was just like, no, we're modeling, we need the brick and mortar. We're modeling after these. Like, it's a totally different business to do pop-up classes and one-off. So it was just kind of like that. I knew that path wasn't going to be open. I didn't want to dive into trying to do something that wasn't going to be a part of the business model just to get some money on the books. But yeah, again, mine was so specific. It's like, you've got to have the lease, you've got to have the doors open in order to really start proving it. I don't know if you feel differently or have any other answer.
No, she asked you to.
Well, so I would say that, again, mine is very specific in terms of being having a consultancy. I don't have a lot of overhead, so I was able to go down the bootstrapping path, and that was sort of what I had identified early on as my comfort zone. There are trade-offs, though. I could, if I had looked at either angel investor or debt financing, probably could have invested more in business development or marketing, which are not my strong suits, and grown more quickly. But I've kind of taken pauses along and I'm only 3 years in, by no means an expert, but taken pauses along the way to sort of say, am I happy with my growth? Yes, so I'm going to kind of continue to do what I'm doing, but I have the luxury of that because I don't have to have the brick and mortar and a lot of the cost that Jess has in her business model.
Yeah. Did that answer your question? Kind of.
Yeah,
A little bit.
for
Okay.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Namase. It's a pleasure to meet both of you. I go to your bar regularly, actually.
Really?
I do. I've been going since actually COVID, like a little after COVID.
Which
Fenway.
location?
Fenway.
Fenway. Heck yeah. Did you visit us at Big Night Live during COVID?
Honestly, I did not. I just started going to the Fenway on Boylston Ave. Like I usually go there and I hit core power. So I'm really like a yogi on the low.
Cool.
But yeah, so it's definitely a pleasure meeting you, both of you. I'm a founder myself. I'm in the pharmacy space and chronic disease. So my niche is a little bit different. But I was very curious to understand the criteria that you alluded to about debt, because you said all debt isn't bad debt. And my debt appetite is actually very low, similar to yours. Like, I don't like the idea of using or spending money. Even personally, like, I don't like the idea of credit cards. Like, so I'm very risk averse when it comes to debt. But I do recognize its utilization. But I can also see how it kind of helped you expand your brand while diluting ownership. Now you got more branches. So I've seen the debt work for me just from what you said. I'm just trying to understand, I think this is a question more for you in terms of what is that criteria for you to distinguish between bad debt and good debt at this early stage?
That's a tough question, man, because that all depends on the terms of the agreement that you kind of lay out. What I would say is, while I want you to take risk, I don't want you to put up your house. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, you're gonna need a place to live, right? If everything goes belly up, you don't want to lose your home. So when I talk about good debt versus bad debt, it's part of creating this organization is to limit your risk and your exposure, right? And then by putting up your house and things like that, you just open yourself up to that exposure again. So I think one is it's about the deal, the opportunity, and two, like, okay, they're going to give you some money, but what else are they going to bring to the table, right? Are they going to bring, hey, we're going to be a consultant, we're going to work with you while you kind of figure this thing out. I mean, good debt versus bad debt. Like I said, I think it's hard to just kind of call it good or bad, depending without being able to know the specifics of the deal, right? Because to me, that's everything, is understanding the deal and what the requirements are and what the callback is. If you can't meet your requirements, what that looks like, that determines what's a good deal or a bad deal to me. So I think it's kind of hard to just say, oh, this is good, this is bad, candidly.
And I don't think any financial person would have said that the debt that I took on in relation to the cash flow of the business was bad debt. It was just bad timing right before COVID and when our cash flow went to zero. So yeah, and I mean, to put it in perspective, as hard as it was, that house that I had to leverage, I would have never been able to afford that house had it not been for my success leading up to that point with the business. Yeah. So it's kind of like the business created that value, and I was a little surprised, and I'm curious if you know anything about the 7A loans, but when you sign on a SBA loan, it's usually, at least for me, it was backed by the government, but through a institution. So it was through Bank of America. When things got bad during the pandemic, we were not dealing with the SBA. We were dealing with Bank of America, which was what made it so scary. And I think that's something that when I signed on the dotted line with the loan, it was like, oh, this is backed by the government. So if things go belly up, then like 75% of this will be covered by the government. That's what I was under the impression that was going to be the case. And that was not the case. It was like, oh no, okay, you got to keep, we didn't really come that close. It was just more of like, I think that if in some ways that debt was a really good thing, because I don't know that I would have persevered as much as I did had I not been leveraged tied.
Yeah.
If I could have kind of just wiped my hands of it and walked away, then maybe wouldn't have made it through the pandemic. So that debt and knowing that my home was on the line and things like that kind of kept me moving in the right direction. So there's a lot to consider. I don't think taking out debt when you have no cash flow, it's kind of going to be hard to do anyway. But once you have cash flow, it's pretty easy equation on what you can afford in terms of the monthly payments and things like that.
Well, thank you both.
Hi. I'm Etuna. I actually go to Northeastern too, and I'm also involved in IDEA.
Awesome.
Funnily enough. But so I just came up with an idea for a startup like a week ago. So I'm at a very, very idea stage. So I was wondering, when you were starting your business at the beginning and when you decided to go at it alone without a partner, like how did that come about? And if you ever regretted like not having a co-founder early on? Thank you.
Right, I feel like right at the very, very beginning where you are is when I was thinking about that. Like, oh, should I find somebody to go in with me? And I think it just like didn't happen. Like there just weren't conversations I was having where it was like, aha, cool, we think the same way. You're at a place in your life where you could take this risk with me. Because I was at a place where it was like, didn't have kids yet, very, very lucky, didn't have student loans, and it was sort of able to go all in on it, like full-time effort. And I knew that I wasn't going to take on a 50-50 partner that wasn't also going all in on it. So it just didn't come up, it didn't come to be. I was open to it. And I even remember one of my friends, still friends to this day, but I like asked her if she was interested. But she was psych background and getting her doctorate and things like that, and she just didn't want to. But then just kind of let it go and just continued pushing forward, but open to the idea of a co-founder. And then once you get it certain ways in, you're kind of like, nah, I've done all the work.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Padmaja. I'm also early stage startup founder. My question is about advisors. How do you go about getting advisors for your startup when you're in an early stage. And I don't know, Kirana, you mentioned another company that already had everybody lined up so they could launch and they could get started right away. So how does that really happen?
So for this particular individual, it was actually it wasn't a short process. I mean, he had to go out. He struggled for 2 years trying to find folks who would be willing to work with him, knowing that at right now, in this moment today, this company isn't producing any revenue. Right? This is something that I want to do, that I have a dream of doing, not that I am doing. So how you would go about finding those folks. You could always reach out to us at the MBDA. We're happy to try to help you find those folks or pair those folks with you. And if not, one of us on our staff, if they don't have the intellectual prowess to do it, then we'll outsource that work. But in our staff, we have a ton of folks who have done M&A. We have folks who have run banks. We have folks who have, produced, who've sold $100 million organizations. So we have in-house a lot of staff that we could potentially leverage for your use. But at the same time, it's opening up the phone book, is opening up, not the phone book, right? How old am I? But it's reaching out, right? It's reaching out, Googling whatever and whatever position you may need, and reaching out to those folks, right? And being very candid and transparent about, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. This is where I'm at today. Do you have time? Do you have the cycles? Do you want to do these things? Because believe it or not, there are a lot of people out there who actually want to help us, right? Who want to see you do well who are just sitting at home, not knowing what they don't know, not knowing that you're out there, right? They don't know they're waiting for your call, but they really are.
I would like to kind of ask a question that sort of is in the same direction. I used to go to a lot of different startup types of conferences and meeting sessions, and I never met my people. And I am interested in the arts and sort of interacting with sports in terms of like fashion design. And so, I'm wondering about angel investors and other people who would be interested in working with people who don't, have the traditional skills, business skills, but, have an idea. So, I stopped going to a lot of the angel investor things because there was one particular woman who just like, when she found out that I didn't have like all of this business acumen and funds, she would like, whenever I showed up, she would tell me that, no, I couldn't be here, I had to leave. So I'm wondering like what other circles within my interests could you guys like maybe suggest that these people could be people who could be like part of my cheering section,
Yeah, I would say first of all, lack of business acumen could be replaced with a well thought out business plan. And that is something you can do from home, without anybody else's support, just kind of using Google and taking your idea out of up here down onto paper. And that's like a really great place to fill the void where you don't have those normal skills, like as I didn't. I was studying science. So that's one. But also, have you ever heard of I did a program called Streetwise MBA, Interize. Have you heard of Interize? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that could be something that you look into. It's It's for people with a business idea or on. I think the one that I did was folks that had a venture already and you wanted to kind of help it survive. But they also have different coursework for all different levels of startups. And yeah, it was like I was surrounded by other small business owners or hopeful small business owners. So yeah, that was called Interrise. And the one I did was called Streetwise MBA. And it was like we met once a week for 10 or 12 weeks and finished it with a growth plan. So I think I had 2 studios open when I did that program and finished with like a growth plan that I could have taken to a bank or, raised more. I can't remember exactly what my growth plan was, but learned a lot, met a lot of great people that I'm still friends with to this day.
I would also suggest reaching out to the CIC. They're a part of the Department of Commerce. I believe they're funded through the Capital Readiness Grant, but that could be an organization that you could potentially work with as well.
And then I would just add SCORE can help set you up with some consultants, small business consultants who can help you on the business side in developing that plan. And then the I think it's Mass Cultural Council. I'm an HR consultant, but I've worked with a smaller organization that's in the arts. They have grants within the arts, so you might check out the Mass Cultural Council as well.
Also, maybe look at BECMA. BECMA? BECMA. BECCMA.
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Catherine, and I think like many people here, I'm also working on my own early stage startup. And so I was really curious about what you said, Kidane, about mentors. And I was wondering, for a lot of the really great mentors I have met, they don't have a lot of time. That's why they're great mentors. And I was wondering, how do you really optimize what you can get out of their time?
How do you optimize what you can get out of their time?
Yeah, since I can only talk to them for maybe 30 minutes every month.
Coming in with a game plan, right? Knowing what you're gonna be, what's the purpose of our meeting? Like, why are we having this call? What are we doing? What we like to do at the MBDA is we set up cadence calls, right? So we'll have a call with you, we'll have a conversation, and then everyone walks away with an action item, right? So then making sure that when you come back to that call, that you're not kind of you're not kind of repeating the same thing over and over again, but right, I've checked the box, I've taken my steps forward, and here we are. So that way, that while you are together, that time is being spent transitioning you forward, as opposed to kind of you staying and moving laterally.
Great.
Awesome. All right.
Unfortunately, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much.
Yes. Round of applause. Thank you guys so much, and thank you all for your time. We have a lot more in store for today and the rest of the week, and we have our welcome party presented by HPE here at 6 p.m. And in this room specifically, the next session is Walking the Tightrope, Balancing Academics and Entrepreneurship. If that's not what you're looking for and you need to find another session or change rooms, our folks outside at the registration desk can help you. And if you're joining us virtually, you don't need to go anywhere, just hang tight and we'll be right back with your next session. Yeah, thank you.
No, not at